I have a very special author to talk about today. He was the king of flash fiction before that style of writing had a name. Episodes of Star Trek the original series were based on his short fiction. Gary Gygax listed him as one of the authors that influenced the creation of Dungeons and Dragons, and Stephen King has said that he wrote one of the most important books ever written in the horror genre. His innovative style changed the way people look at genre fiction, and it is a shame that he's not talked about more today. The author I'm talking about is Fredric Brown. Fredric Brown was born in Cincinnati, Ohio in 1906 and spent his early adult life in Milwaukee working as a proofreader and typesetter for the Milwaukee Journal. After his writing career took off, he moved to the Southwest and spent the rest of his life in Tucson, Arizona. His writing career began in the 1930s when he started selling mystery short stories to magazines such as Street and Smith's Detective Story, Thrilling Detective, and Detective Fiction Weekly. A Little Hard Apple to Peel, which was originally published in 1942, is a great example of what you get with his mystery short fiction. It gives off Stephen King short story vibes, which makes sense considering he was an inspiration for King. The story is about these strange things that happen in a small town, and they all revolve around the same mysterious and ruthless person. It really does feel like a King short story, all the way down to interesting locals that always make King's stories feel grounded. A Little White Lie, originally published in 10 Detective Aces in 1942, is a great example of his ability to lead the reader on and finish the story with a twist that you would never see coming. The story revolves around a woman who has married a man after only knowing him for like a month, and then they buy a house where a woman had been murdered and the murderer is still at large. Throughout the story, she tries to figure out whether or not the killer is going to return to the house, and as the story goes on, she begins to have doubts about her husband's background. I won't go any further into it because it's such a great story with an amazing twist, but I really enjoyed it. His first published science fiction story was Not Yet the End, published in Captain Future magazine in 1941. This story, which also shows up in Nightmares and Geezenstacks, is a fun little story about aliens coming to Earth looking for slaves for their minds. They pick up two bipedal creatures with 5 digits on each hand, one male and one female, and they give them intelligence tests. They fail so miserably that the aliens leave in disgust and say, this planet isn't even worth blowing up. Maybe in a million years, we can come back and get some creatures that can actually think. The story ends with a local newspaper reporting that 2 apes have been reported missing from their island habitat. Fredric Brown always has a little dash of humor in his science fiction, and I really enjoy it. Even the horror he writes, as messed up as it can be, he's got that touch of humor that is just like a little sprinkle of flavor on top of the genre fiction ice cream this man is making. One of his most popular science fiction short stories, Arena, which was published in 1944 in Astounding Science Fiction magazine, would go on to be turned into an episode of Star Trek the original series. Arena was eventually republished in the Science Fiction Hall of Fame Volume 1, and that covers like from 1929 to 1964. The story is about Bob Carson, the pilot of a one-man scout ship amid an escalating conflict between humans and alien outsiders. Bob Carson is rendered unconscious and wakes up in an arena. While there, he is given a message from an alien race that is so far above humans and the outsiders that they have transcended past the laws of reality. They tell Ben that if the humans and the outsiders armadas fight, it will wipe both species out, and they'll never have a chance to transcend to this next level of sapience or intelligence or whatever. As a way of circumventing the war, these beings have brought in an outsider and a human, and they are going to fight to the death in this arena, and whichever person wins, their race will be saved and given a chance to kind of move on and grow. It's a very interesting story, and I can understand why they turned it into a Star Trek episode. According to his wife, he hated writing. He would do anything he could to put off sitting down and writing a story. He would go play flute, play chess with people, go see friends, just whatever he could do. Then when he had to actually start writing and he was struggling to get anything written, he would just sit around and think for days on end. He would take bus rides that weren't really going anywhere, and it was just so he could be by himself and think about his story and then come back and bang it out. I bring this up because there were times in his career when he didn't want to write or couldn't get the words on the page, and he needed to get paid. And so some of his stories don't hold up as well as others. So when I make recommendations in this video, they're the better works in his bibliography. They're a great place to start so you can find out whether or not you like Fredric Brown. And if you fall in love with his writing, I guarantee even his stinkers are still going to be pretty good for you as a Fredric Brown enjoyer. He made most of his money writing mystery novels and short stories. His first mystery novel was published in 1947, titled The Fabulous Clip Joint, which was the first book in a series starring Ed and Ambrose Hunter. They are stories about a young detective who is tutored by his uncle who used to be a private eye. I have not read any of them, but you can get them in a wonderful edition from Hafner Press, and I may need to do that before they sell out. I want to give the series a try. I know I can get them on ebook, but sometimes I really like having special editions, and I especially like it when it's a special edition from an author that most people have forgotten about or never known. I will cover more of his crime fiction when I get to the reading recommendations toward the end of the video, but man, he's written a lot of crime fiction, and some of it is better than others. As I mentioned earlier, one of his flaws was he needed to get paid but didn't want to write, so sometimes he just shoved something out into the world half-baked. His first science fiction novel, What Mad Universe, written in 1949, is on my TBR. I want to try and read it this year. The book is a satire of the writing conventions of the American science fiction magazines of the 1940s, and that is right up my alley. I am a big fan of very talented authors making fun of their own genre. It's just amazing. His most popular science fiction novel is Martians Go Home, which is a farce and a satire of what it would be like if Martians arrive on the planet, but their goal isn't to conquer Earth. They just want to relentlessly troll humanity. The humor doesn't land as well for the modern reader because he uses a lot of slang from the time, but I still think the book is funny and worth reading. When it comes to the slang, the Martians sound like a caricature of a douchey guy on the radio from the 1940s, early 50s, and it's funny, but some people will be like, I don't like this. I also need to mention that they did make a movie in the 90s starring Randy Quaid, but for the love of all that is unholy, don't waste your time watching it. He also has a collection of science fiction stories called Space on My Hands. The story Crisis 1999 is basically one of his detective stories, but written in a science fiction setting, and it is very good. It is a prime example of his ability to mix genres together in new and refreshing ways. I have not read everything in that collection because I've been taking my time with it, but I've enjoyed everything I've read in it so far. Okay, so I have gone through all of this, and I still have not brought up his most important book, and that book is Nightmares in Geezenstacks. I have a review of it on my channel. If you go watch it, be warned, it's one of my earliest videos. I was filming it at 5:30 in the morning, and I was most certainly a zombie. Nightmares in Geezenstacks is the book that Stephen King said is one of the most important books published in the horror genre. Stephen King listed it as one of the 100 most important books in the genre. In his nonfiction work, Dance Macabre, he even puts an exclamation mark next to it because it is particularly important. It is tied with In a Lonely Place by Carl Edward Wagner as my favorite collection of horror fiction written by a single author. Every single story in there is creepy or unsettling and sometimes downright terrifying. I still have mild panic attacks every time I think about Nightmare in Blue, and I read it 2 years ago. Some of the stories in there are less than a page long, and some of them are 15 pages long. This collection is what makes me think he was the king of flash fiction before that term existed. They are all just so good. If you read only one thing on this list, it needs to be Nightmares in Geezenstacks. I just find it so amazing that someone known for mysteries and science fiction can cross over into the horror genre and create something that the master of the genre thinks is an important work. It goes to show how great of a writer Fredric Brown was. It didn't matter what genre he was writing in. He was going to take the tropes, bend them to his will, turn them inside out, and give the reader a story unlike anything they had read before. It's such a shame that he's not more popular today. He wrote in 3 of the most popular genres in fiction and was a major influence for a lot of important writers such as Stephen King, Gene Wolfe, Terry Pratchett, Douglas Adams. The last 2 on the list were heavily influenced by his writing style and his humorous science fiction. I don't think I expressed that well enough earlier in this video when I was discussing his science fiction works, but he's funny. Martians Go Home is ridiculous and over the top, but he uses that as a way to convey a very funny story that I had a great time reading. Now that I'm talking about Martians Go Home again, I guess I should start talking about what you should read from Fredric Brown. When it comes to science fiction, Martians Go Home is a great place to start. There's an audiobook out there. The book's relatively easy to get. Then you want to move on to something like Space on My Hands or What Mad Universe, which I still need to read. I plan on reading them both. Another option is The Best of Fredric Brown, which is a collection of some of his short science fiction stories. The problem with The Best of Fredric Brown is that it's not necessarily the best so much as it is the stories that the editor was able to get the rights to publish. I'm not saying any of the stories are bad, but you just have to go in understanding that it's not actually a curated best of collection. Another way to get most of his science fiction is in these bulk ebook collections that you can find on every site that sells ebooks. I've seen them on the Kobo store, Amazon, Google Books, books. I think someone just got the rights to a lot of his stuff and threw it all into these 99-cent collections. I don't know how the formatting is. I don't know what the quality is of the ebooks themselves, but for 99 cents, and they have a decent amount of reviews, they're probably legible. Now, the gold standard for collecting his science fiction short stories and novels is through NESFA Press. There are 2 hardcover books that you can buy, and you can also get them as ebooks. The 2 books are From These Ashes, the complete short SF of Fredric Brown, and Martians and Madness, the complete SF novels of Fredric Brown. So 2 very beautiful hardcover books. You got everything he wrote in the science fiction genre. Now, unlike his SF works, you can buy a collection of his mystery stories that are curated by someone who knows what they're talking about. It's hard to come by, but Carnival of Crime, the best mystery stories of Fredric Brown, edited by Francis M. Nevins Jr. and Martin H. Greenberg, is amazing. Both editors knew what they were doing, and they went into the project with the intent of putting only his best mystery stories in the book. If you happen to find a copy, you are in for quite the treat. You can also look up the list of stories in the book and just find alternate sources for them. There are a lot of Fredric Brown mystery novels you can still find in the wild. Some of them have been reprinted in the last few years by smaller publishers. Things like Miss Darkness, the great short crime fiction of Fredric Brown, is an okay substitute for Carnival of Crime. Honestly, the best way to read his crime fiction is in ebooks. While I was doing research for this video, I found a lot more of his works in digital form than I expected. I would suggest going to your favorite ebook seller and just search for Fredric Brown. I want to add a quick note that in all the story collections, there is some overlap, so you can't go wrong just picking one up and running with it. Like I said, there's a couple of stories in the crime collection that I really like that are also in Nightmares and Geezenstacks. As I mentioned earlier, almost all of his horror fiction is in Nightmares and Geezenstacks, which is great because it's all in one place and it's being published by a publisher that deserves your business. Valancourt Books is the best, so go check it out on their website. If I could only suggest one thing he's written, it would of course be Nightmares and Geezenstacks. It is such a great example of what he can do as a writer, and you see elements of science fiction and mystery in his horror fiction. In this modern world of short attention spans and the constant search for the unique, it is such a shame that Fredric Brown is not popular. He's the unknown king of flash fiction that modern readers would love. Between his offbeat and scary mysteries, his terrifying horror flash fiction, and his humorous SF works that shine a light on all the ridiculousness of the pulp era, he should be one of the most popular writers of his time. I hope that all of you will give him a chance. The barrier to entry to get into his writing is so low. It's like 99 cents to get a decent collection of his works that you can dive right into. Let me know in the comments if you are a fan of Fredric Brown or you want to give some of his writing a chance, and also let me know if you have a favorite Fredric Brown story or novel, because I would like to look into it. Thanks for watching, and with that, I'll see you next time.